10. A jealous student with a sword. In Florida, a high school student was ambushed and then stabbed by another student who was angry that the victim had been sleeping with his ex-girlfriend. Police in Miramar say that the 17-year-old killer planned the murder with his current girlfriend and even received help from one of his 16-year-old female friends. The victim was Dwight Grant, 18 years old. He was lured into the stairwell of his apartment complex by the girlfriend of Andre Dexter Clemens. Once in the stairwell, Andre beat Grant up, stabbed him in the neck with a knife, and then took a sword that one of the teenage girls had been holding and plunged it into his chest. The trio of murderers then carried Grant's body down the stairs and hid it in some bushes near the block of apartments. There was actually a trail of blood that ultimately led the police to Grant's mutilated corpse. And here's perhaps the most ridiculous part of the whole thing, aside from the whole murder with a sword bit. When the police checked text message records, they found Andre had been texting the other girls his plans for murder. One of the text messages even said, "Murder will definitely happen soon." 9. A deadly Barcelona triangle. In Barcelona, Spain, police discovered a car that had been lit on fire with a body inside the trunk. The body was so terribly burned that it was basically nothing but ashes. Police were able to trace a number on the chassis of the burned vehicle back to its owner, Pedro Rodriguez. He turned out to be a member of the local police force in Barcelona, called the Guardia Urbana. The remains of a prosthetic in the trunk revealed that the victim was also Pedro Rodriguez. But this is only the beginning of a truly bizarre case. The Barcelona police obviously wanted to catch the killer extra badly, considering the victim was one of their own. They've already arrested 2 people in connection to the murder. One of them is Rosa Peral, the victim's partner. They've also arrested her former boyfriend, a man named Albert Lopez. These 2 were also members of the Guardia Urbana. They were all cops. Even more, they were all cops that had a history of allegations of police abuse logged against them. When it came to trial, both officers accused the other one of the murder. Rosa Peral told the court that it was Albert Lopez who came to her house, murdered her boyfriend in a jealous fit of anger, and then asked her to help him cover it up. He allegedly threatened her, saying that if she didn't help, he would make her daughters choke on their own vomit. Albert Lopez had a bit of a different story, though. He said that he found the dead body of Rodriguez inside the trunk of the car and then helped burn it because he and Rosa Peral were getting back together. But no matter how you look at it, this was a weird love triangle gone terribly wrong. Investigators believe that the murderers had gotten back together, Pedro Rodriguez had busted them in the act, and this got him burned to death in his own car. 8. Canadian love triangle gone wrong. In Canada, a Toronto jury convicted David Obregon Castro of murder in the second degree for stabbing a woman to death in her very own apartment. The Crown prosecutor called it a case of a love triangle gone terribly wrong. And yet this very same jury acquitted David's former lover and the co-accused, Sarai Lopez Iglesias. They accepted her testimony that she was being abused by David and had been dragged to the apartment under extreme distress, as David was carrying a gun. He was a dangerous drug dealer, and he had a history of extreme violence. But here's where the case gets really weird. We know for sure, based on texts and testimonies, that Lopez Iglesias was very angry at the deceased, Abigail Elliott, because she had been messing around with David. When David admitted what he was doing, Iglesias got so angry that the 2 girls got into a fight behind Abigail's apartment. During the fight, Lopez pulled out a knife and one of Abigail's male friends struck her with a metal pipe. It was after this that David and Lopez showed up at Abigail's apartment and Lopez plunged a knife into her belly. There's no doubt about who killed who, and yet Sarai Lopez Iglesias has gotten off on the murder charges. She allegedly suffered from mental illness and was in an abusive relationship that pushed her to do things she may not have normally done. In the end, even though David wasn't the one who stabbed Abigail, he's the one staring at a second-degree murder charge. 7. A nuclear love triangle. There has only ever been one nuclear disaster in the United States of America, and it's not one that most people know about. In the Arlington National Cemetery, you may be surprised to learn that there is a single casket lined with lead to prevent radiation leaking out from the corpse of Richard Leroy McKinley. He was the victim of a disaster in 1961 at the Idaho National Laboratory. The nuclear reactor there, the SL-1, was a prototype designed for the military. It was actually a portable nuclear reactor that was supposed to be easy to transport and easy to assemble. It was on the night of January 3rd that the meltdown happened, killing night workers Jack Burns, Richard Legg, and Richard McKinley. According to an anonymous high-ranking member of the Atomic Energy Commission, it was Burns who started the meltdown on purpose after receiving a phone call from his wife that she wanted a divorce. It's believed that he sabotaged the nuclear reactor in a sudden burst of murderous rage because his co-worker, Richard Legg, was sleeping with his wife, and now she was planning to leave him. Poor Richard McKinley was just an unlucky bystander. How do you feel knowing that the only nuclear disaster in U.S. history was likely the result of a very upset husband on the losing point of a love triangle? Let us know your thoughts on this bizarre case in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe to help support the channel. 6. Bashed and drowned. A love triangle in France turned to devastation after two teens were charged with murder. It happened in Paris, when a young woman was brutally beaten and then tossed into a river by her classmates. Two teens were arrested on the Paris outskirts and charged with the murder of a girl named Alicia, with both suspects being only 15 years old. Nevertheless, both the teens are facing up to 20 years in prison. Public prosecutor Eric Carbeau said that during questioning, the girls showed absolutely no sign of remorse for what they had done. According to investigators, the killing itself was the result of a failed love triangle. Alicia had been hooking up with a boy at school just before he started a relationship with one of the girls that killed her. But even after their relationship ended and the boy was dating the new girl, things continued to spiral. Inappropriate pictures of Alicia were leaked online, leading to some serious friction between the three teens. Everything exploded when the three teenagers met beneath a highway on the outskirts of town. The two girls got into an argument, and that was when the boy who had slept with both of them appeared from behind a concrete pillar and began to punch Alicia in the face. Then, wanting to get rid of the evidence of their crime, the two teens took the girl and threw her into the river, still breathing. 5. An NYPD fit of rage. An officer with the NYPD, Yvonne Wu, was charged with murder and attempted murder for shooting her ex-girlfriend and murdering her new lover in a bizarre fit of rage. Yvonne had been on the force for 5 years when she carried out the double shooting. She got off work, drove to Jenny Lee's house in Brooklyn, and waited for hours until Jenny finally showed up with her new love interest, a woman named Jamie Liang. Once she saw them, Yvonne Wu opened fire and sprayed both women with deadly bullets. She immediately left the home, confessed to her fellow officers what she had done, and was voluntarily arrested. When the police made it over to Jenny's house, they found her lying on the floor of her bedroom with a gunshot wound to her torso. Jenny's girlfriend, the one Yvonne had been so jealous about, was found bleeding out on the living room floor. Jenny managed to recover and survive, but Jamie Liang died in the hospital. 4. Murder at the airport. In El Paso, a love triangle ended in murder at the airport. A Southwest airline employee was bludgeoned to death by the husband of the wife he had been sleeping with. It was just as Juan Anzaldo finished his shift at the El Paso International Airport that Bernard Walker Kreisman surprised him and beat him to death. It happened as Juan was standing beside his car in the airport parking lot about to leave. Bernard had a few words with the man and then bonked him on the head until he stopped moving. According to Fox News, the attack didn't disrupt operations at the airport at all, but it still strikes me as pretty bold that anyone would commit murder in an airport parking lot. Then again, when you consider the fact that Juan was messing around with this guy's wife, anything is possible. He probably drove all the way there in a stinking fit of rage, then exploded when he finally got face to face with the adulterer. 3. A bizarre scheme. Yet another U.S. law enforcement officer has gotten into some big trouble because of a love triangle gone wrong. This time it was a deputy U.S. Marshal, Ian Diaz, who was indicted for a bizarre plot that he had orchestrated against his ex-girlfriend to have her locked behind bars for months. Ian Diaz is facing a bunch of charges, but the big one is conspiracy to commit cyber stalking. Ian worked with his wife, Angela Maria Diaz, to create a fake online persona for a girl that Ian used to date, Michelle Hadley. He then used the fake account to send himself harassing messages and to post weird online advertisements. The ads invited people to participate in highly irregular sexual fantasies. Basically, Ian and Angela did whatever they could to make Michelle Hadley look like a crazy person. They almost got away with it too. They covered up their scheme by using fake emails, VPNs, and only speaking to each other through text by using encrypted messaging applications. Ian and his wife then reported to the police that Michelle Hadley posed a genuine threat to them because of the threatening messages. Local officials arrested Michelle and threw her in jail for 3 months. But by around this time, the scheme was unraveling. Michelle Hadley was totally innocent, and one hard look at the case proved that. Angela Diaz was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Her U.S. Marshal boyfriend has yet to be charged with anything, and Michelle Hadley is suing the city of Anaheim and the Anaheim Police Department. It's a huge fiasco, and all because Ian and Angela were upset about Ian's questionable romantic history. 2. The Asbury Park Killer. The man from Asbury Park who drove somebody over with his car and dragged him along the road in 2019 has been given 10 years in prison for aggravated manslaughter. Johnny Westbrook was also ordered to serve at least 85% of the sentence before he can even think about applying for parole. But perhaps the most shocking part is that Johnny is 85 years old. The senior citizen won't get out of jail until he's nearly 100. And all because of a weird love triangle between a woman he was interested in and another tenant living in his same building, a man over 20 years younger than him. It was in December, the year before the murder, that Johnny met Daniel Rivera, 63 years old. Coincidentally, Daniel seemed to have a relationship on the go with a woman whom Johnny was interested in. Johnny saw Daniel as a romantic rival, and so he ran over him with his Ford Explorer and dragged him several feet over the concrete before leaving him to die. Johnny then drove back to his apartment and sat down to relax. The police discovered his vehicle parked nearby with the victim's blood all over it. But here's the deal. This was hardly Johnny's first love triangle gone wrong. When he was younger, he served 6 years in prison for shooting a man who had gotten involved with a 23-year-old woman whom he was interested in. He'd given this girl an engagement ring. She went and messed around with somebody else, and so he showed up and shot the guy. It looks like Johnny has a long life of rejection, jealousy, and murderous fits of rage. 1. A kiss missed. A woman in Illinois has gotten into some serious trouble for shooting a man who refused to give her a kiss. Her name is Claudia Resendez Flores, and she became infuriated when the man and his girlfriend both refused to kiss her. It was all part of some bizarre love triangle, or rather a love triangle that never came to fruition. You see, Claudia was staying with her two friends, James Jones and his girlfriend. She tried to kiss James in front of his girlfriend. He refused, and then he kissed his own girlfriend instead. Then Claudia tried to kiss his girlfriend to get things warmed up, but this just freaked everyone out. Talk about an awkward situation. Normally, this is where things would end. Everyone would go to bed and try to forget about what happened. But Claudia was so mad that nobody would kiss her that she grabbed James's gun, pointed it at his chest, and when James tried to slap the gun away from her, her finger hit the trigger and Jones was dead.
Number 10. Snake on a plane. An AirAsia passenger plane was forced to make an unscheduled landing in early 2022. Why? A slithering, slimy, no-good snake was moving through the overhead lights. It could be seen by the passengers as its silhouette shone through the cabin's light casings, like some terrible evil shadow making its way towards the cockpit. Luckily, these kinds of incidents don't happen very often. Somehow, the snake got on board the flight before they left the capital, Kuala Lumpur, en route to Oahu on Borneo Island. As soon as the captain realized the snake was bothering the passengers and slithering through the lights, he took the appropriate actions. He landed 560 miles, 901 kilometers short of the destination, so that the plane could be fumigated. Why would you fumigate an airplane? Well, no one knew what kind of snake it was. All they could see was the black outline of its body as it moved along. This is Malaysia we're talking about, where there are multiple species of extremely venomous serpents. This was a major risk to the people on board, even though the AirAsia Chief Safety Officer, Leong Tien Ling, said at no time was the crew at risk. The truth is that if that snake had proved to be venomous and it fell onto somebody's lap, things could have turned out very differently. Number 9. The Stowaway Pigeon. On February 28, 2020, a far less threatening animal terrorized a Go Air flight in India. This time, the flight was interrupted by a pigeon. Passengers who boarded the flight at the Ahmedabad International Airport never imagined that as they were prepping for the short trip to Jaipur, a pigeon would appear out of nowhere and start flapping through the cabin. This time, the plane didn't actually get airborne. It was just as the plane was about to depart at roughly 5 p.m. that the bird exploded out of an overhead locker and started shedding feathers all over the place. The shocked airline staff tried to salvage the situation and help the poor animal, but it kept bonking people in the head and squirming out of their grip. It was complete and total chaos. But by far the strangest part is that the pigeon managed to get into one of the overhead compartments in the first place. We don't know how the pigeon got onto the plane, but we know the flight was forced to redock. Everyone was terrified that they were going to get poop on them, and then a door was opened and the pigeon was allowed to fly back outside. Nobody got hurt, not even the pigeon. Number 8. A bat in the cabin. An Air India flight was forced to turn back when a bat was unleashed inside the cabin. Passengers were in disbelief when a little bat started flapping through the corridors of the Boeing 737 like a tiny diseased bomb shedding its hair and feces everywhere. It was utterly disgusting, and the plane made a full 360 because of it. The flight originally took off from New Delhi in May of 2021 on its way to Newark in the United States. Nobody knows where the bat came from, but it was too fast and too disgusting for anybody to catch. By the time the plane identified the problem, contacted air traffic control, and got back to the international airport in Delhi, it was nearly 4 o'clock in the morning. Passengers disembarked and were put on a different flight, while wildlife officials entered the plane to take care of the bat situation. Sadly for the fuzzy, disease-ridden flying rodent, It had died sometime during the confusion. Wildlife officials found the bat deceased in business class, lying unmoving near seat number 8. Number 7. The stowaway cat. A pilot in French Guiana got the surprise of a lifetime in summer 2015 when he found a cat on the wing of his airplane. The pilot was already airborne when he realized there was a cat gripping the wing with its claws. The frightened animal was stranded and scared for its life. When you hear the expression hanging on for dear life, this poor cat holding desperately to the wing of the plane should be the first thing that comes to mind. Luckily, this was not a commercial airplane. It was an open-air Skyranger plane, which kind of looks like a really primitive helicopter. Romain Jantot, the man behind the controls, was studying to become a professional helicopter pilot at the time of the incident. He practiced his flying skills at the 1634 ULM Club. The cat that snuck onto his wing happened to be the mascot out of the club, though nobody has ever given her a proper name. They simply call the cat Minou, which is the French word for kitty. Now, you probably want to know what happened to the cat. She wasn't actually in any immediate danger because the airplane wasn't high enough for her to freeze. The biggest thing worrying the pilot was that the cat might jump. If the cat jumped, she would certainly not land on her 4 legs after plummeting hundreds of feet to the ground. So Romain eased off the throttle and began his descent. He made as gentle of a landing as he possibly could, then helped the cat get back on solid ground. About 5 minutes later, the cat had her nose stuffed in a bowl of food, seemingly already forgetting her insane ride through the clouds. Number 6. Delayed by a mouse. A Qatar Airways flight was delayed for 6 hours by a creature you would never expect to see on an aircraft. A single mouse was spotted by passengers scurrying through the cabin. It caused enough of a panic that everyone who had gotten on the plane was kicked off, and they had to sit in the lobby for another 6 hours. It happened at the Adolfo Suarez Barajas Airport in Madrid back in December of 2014. The flight was bound for Doha in Qatar. The delay of 6 hours meant a lot of people missed their connections, delaying important vacations to places like Thailand and Bali. Nonetheless, they couldn't exactly be flying through the sky with rampaging mice on board. The plane had to be fumigated, and then it had to be aired out for the noxious fumes to dissipate. Their airline couldn't exactly let a bunch of people sit inside of a plane that was filled with toxic fumes. It would be like if they were seated in a metal can filled with poisonous gas. No vacation is worth that amount of trouble. When the fumes were gone and the flight could finally take off again, the mouse was discovered dead inside the cabin. There was only one, and it was extremely small, but the crew could not have taken the risk of flying with the mouse on board. Even just one mouse can cause significant damage to an airplane. It could have chewed through wires, ruined the electric work, and made a nest somewhere in the plane's underbelly. It could have even found its way into the luggage compartment, where it might have pooped in someone's suitcase. Number 5. The Tarantula. Passengers on board a flight operated by Volaris, a budget airline in Mexico, were greeted by a giant and terrifying tarantula. The flight was traveling between Mexico and Brazil and had managed to pick up a stowaway monster. It almost definitely came from Brazil, but nobody knows for sure. The tarantula was so big, it should have needed to pay for a seat to be on the flight. As you may already know, tarantulas are not actually dangerous. They are huge, frightening to look at, and they can bite. But there is no tarantula in the world that can kill a person. They just don't have venom. It would certainly sting if one were to bite you, but you'd get over it eventually. In this case, though, nobody had the misfortune of being bitten by the spider. It was captured by someone on the plane who stuck it in a plastic bag to be disposed of. Number 4. Snake on a plane. Again. In January of 2013, passengers aboard a Qantas jet flying over Australia saw something that shocked them to their cores. It was about 20 minutes into the flight, which was headed from the city of Cairns to Papua New Guinea, when the discovery was made. A passenger saw something slithery on the wing and pointed it out to the staff. It looked like a snake, and yet they were thousands of feet above the ground. After a few people had gathered around the window to gawk at the curious stowaway, everyone agreed it was definitely a serpent. And a big serpent at that. The snake was at least 12 feet, 3.6 meters long, what looked to be a scrub python native to the hostile desert regions of northern Australia. By the time the passengers saw the reptile, they were already at an altitude of 30,000 feet, 9,144 meters. The poor snake was freezing to death, and so it curled itself into the tightest nook of the wing as it could find. It then spent the rest of the flight in bitter cold conditions, but still hanging on for dear life. The temperature on the wing is somewhere around 10 degrees Fahrenheit, with the winds blowing up to 300 miles per hour, 483 kilometers per hour. As for how the snake could have gotten into such a precarious situation, it had likely been a stowaway in the landing gear. It probably crawled in there to keep itself warm. Then when the plane took off, it found itself in a rather unfortunate situation. The snake did make it all the way to Papua New Guinea, but it was in rough shape. Passengers noticed bloodstains on the wing and that the snake had clearly been injured. It slithered away before anyone could reach it and vanished. Number 3. Angry cat. In February of 2021, an angry cat attacked a pilot. It isn't something that happens very often. In fact, this may be the only time a cat has ever attacked a pilot in the middle of a flight. The feline had somehow made it into the cockpit of the plane, which was on its way from Khartoum in Sudan to Doha in Qatar. Faced with strange people, a whole lot of noise, and an unfamiliar setting, the cat went on the offensive. It lashed out at the pilot, who tried to catch the feline, inciting instant chaos. The pilot was attacked, and then the cat tried to run away. It was reported as being feral, angry, and very aggressive. The pilot didn't know what to do, so he turned the plane around. The cat was eventually captured and removed, but not before ruining everybody's travel plans. It's believed the furry stowaway either snuck onto the plane while airline workers were cleaning it overnight, or somehow during the pre-flight engineer check. Number 2. Chihuahua in the luggage. When a couple in Texas were on their way to Las Vegas for a brief vacation in late 2021, they found something unexpected hiding in their luggage. It was as they were boarding their flight to Sin City that they found the intruder. Their luggage was overweight, which seemed a little odd to them. When they opened their bag to take a look, they discovered a Chihuahua stashed among their clothes. The bag was 5 pounds, 2.1 kilograms overweight, roughly the same size as their pet Chihuahua. Don't worry, this was the couple's pet. It wasn't some random Chihuahua that had managed to get inside their suitcase. Instead, Jared Owens admitted to local news that their dog, Icky, has a bit of an issue with burrowing. He loves digging in stuff and had apparently managed to dig himself all the way to the bottom of their suitcase without anyone realizing. When the couple opened the suitcase at baggage check, the dog was stuck inside one of Jared's boots. Luckily for the couple, the airline employee that they were dealing with, a woman named Kathy, agreed to take the dog and hold on to it while they were on their vacation. Otherwise, they could have missed their flight trying to work out arrangements for the poor pup. It's also an extremely good thing they had packed so heavily. If they hadn't opened up their suitcase to see what had them over the weight limit, that poor dog probably would have arrived in Vegas without a heartbeat. Number 1. Yet another snake on a plane. A commercial flight in Mexico erupted in panic when a snake slithered out of the ceiling. The terrifying incident happened in November of 2016, forcing the plane to make an emergency landing. The serpent first slithered out of a crack in the ceiling, right near the overhead luggage compartment, and then just kind of dangled in the cabin. Considering most people on board weren't exactly reptile specialists, nobody knew if the snake was dangerous or not. All they knew was that a potentially deadly reptile was loose in the plane. And if there was one snake in the plane, who said there couldn't be more? You have to admit, this would be pretty frightening. The Aeromexico flight made an emergency landing at the nearest airport, while one of the men on board used a blanket to catch the snake and keep it from biting anyone. When they landed in Mexico City, animal control arrived to take care of the beast. But sadly, they never did say what kind of snake it was. Number 9. Mariah Logan. After spending 3 days in Miami with her friends for spring break in 2019, 23-year-old Mariah Logan decided to bid the city farewell by hanging out of the passenger window and yelling, "Bye, Miami," on her way to the airport. But Logan never caught her plane back to Chicago. She fell out the window and was fatally struck by a Range Rover. The driver initially stopped, but fled the scene before police arrived, sparking a homicide investigation. Meanwhile, the 3 gal pals who were in the car with Logan called her boyfriend, Roy Olden, to give him the tragic news. It was clear when he spoke with the Miami Herald that he was broken by his girlfriend's unexpected death. He said that the couple had the next 5 years of their future planned out when Logan's life was cut short. The young woman's travel companions were equally distraught and reportedly threw themselves onto the pavement in disbelief as investigators combed the highway for the driver of the Range Rover that hit and killed Logan. There are no leads, and the suspect is currently still at large. Number 8. Brittanee Drexel. In 2009, 17-year-old Brittanee Drexel left her home in Rochester, New York for a spring break trip in South Carolina without telling her mom. Dawn Drexel had already told her daughter that she couldn't travel with her friends to Myrtle Beach, but the teen went anyway. A few days into the vacation, Brittanee left the hotel her group was staying at to visit a friend about 1.5 miles, 2.4 kilometers away. Surveillance footage would later show that she entered the resort and left a little while later. Shortly after that, Brittanee stopped texting her boyfriend, John Greco. He grew concerned and called her friends to check on her. They didn't know where she was, so Greco called Brittanee's mom, Dawn, and she got the authorities involved. Police determined that the young woman's cell phone last pinged in the early morning after her disappearance between 50 and 60 miles, 80 and 97 kilometers south of Myrtle Beach, before the device abruptly went dead. They interviewed a nightclub promoter but were unable to classify him as a suspect or rule him out. Dawn moved to the area so that she could actively search for Brittanee, whom she suspected had fallen victim to human trafficking. The FBI, on the other hand, concluded that she was probably murdered and offered a $25,000 reward for information solving the case. 2 jailhouse informants claimed that they saw her being abused at the home of a man named Timothy Taylor. They claimed that Taylor had initially tried selling Brittanee to traffickers but decided to kill her when her missing persons case gained widespread attention. He was never charged, despite failing a polygraph test. Last year, Taylor's mother told the press that she wants people to stop associating her son's name with Brittanee's disappearance, arguing that there's no compelling evidence against him in the case. Number 7. A drug-induced debacle. Earlier this year, 6 cadets from the prestigious West Point Military Academy ended up in a hospital from drug overdoses while spending their spring break in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Police and emergency responders rushed to the group's vacation rental after receiving a call about 6 people who had ingested cocaine laced with fentanyl, a powerful painkiller between 50 and 100 times stronger than heroin. When officers arrived at the scene, there were multiple people in cardiac arrest, including at least 2 who needed CPR and at least 1 who was in critical condition, according to Fort Lauderdale Police Chief Stephen Gollan, who spoke with Local 10 News. First responders administered Narcan to reverse the deadly drug's effects. 2 of the emergency workers also got sick from exposure to the fentanyl and required medical treatment. The cadets were taken to the hospital, and a West Point spokesperson told CNN that the academy was investigating the incident. Local authorities used the disturbing event as an opportunity to remind spring breakers of the dangers associated with fentanyl and to caution the public against mixing drugs and alcohol. Police arrested 21-year-old Axel Giovanni Cassius, the alleged drug dealer who's accused of selling the deadly cocaine to the West Point cadets, and several others who overdosed during spring break this year. Number 6. Aiden Navarez. Like many other college students, 18-year-old Arizona State University freshman Aiden Navarez traveled to Mexico for spring break this year. He went to Cabo with some classmates, where they stayed at the hotel Rio Santa Fe. Just hours after checking in, Navarez accidentally fell off a wall and plummeted to his death. The 20-foot, 6.1 meters wall looked deceptively short, according to ASU student Jake Reithinger, who was at the hotel when Aiden died. Speaking with local news station Arizona's Family, Reithinger explained that from a certain angle, the wall only appeared to be about knee-high, and the tops of palm trees that can be seen next to it looked more like bushes or shrubs. In other words, Navarez had no idea how tall the wall was or the risks he was taking near it. The teen's death was ruled an accident. It's unclear whether he had drugs or alcohol in his system when he fell. Number 5. Dorian Taylor and Yvonne Collier. A 24-year-old Pennsylvania woman named Christine Engelhardt was partying in Miami during spring break last year when she accidentally overdosed on the deadly drug fentanyl. It happened after she met two men from North Carolina named Dorian Taylor and Yvonne Collier and went back to their South Beach hotel room with them. Engelhardt was pronounced dead after being found unresponsive in her hotel room. Just days later, a 21-year-old tourist from Chicago named Walter Riley died from an overdose after obtaining drugs from the same two men who had provided them to Christine. Riley was found unconscious in the street and was soon pronounced dead. A grand jury quickly indicted Taylor and Collier on a slew of charges, including first-degree murder, burglary, and sexual battery. The pair are accused of killing Engelhardt and Riley by giving them deadly opioids. They also allegedly raped Christine while she was incapacitated and then stole her credit cards, which they used to buy liquor. The accused are maintaining their innocence. Collier's lawyer, Phil Reisenstein, reportedly told the Miami Herald that, according to the medical examiner's report, Christine had so many drugs in her system when she died that it was difficult to discern exactly what killed her. But according to the arrest report, the Miami-Dade medical examiner determined that a green pill the men had given Christine contained a so-called rapidly fatal dose of fentanyl. The autopsy also revealed that the young woman's blood alcohol level was nearly 3 times the legal limit when she died, and that asphyxia may have played a role in her death. Number 4. Heather Miller. Unlike many college students, 21-year-old Heather Miller decided against participating in rowdy spring break festivities during her senior year at West Virginia University in 2008. She was invited on a trip to Texas with her girlfriends, but instead, she returned to her hometown of Wheeling with plans to spend time with her family and play video games with her 2 brothers and her sister. One night during her visit, Heather went out with some friends with plans to stay overnight at one of their homes. In the early morning hours, someone rang her parents' doorbell. At first, they thought Heather had changed her mind and came home. But the couple were met by 2 deputies who delivered some unexpected bad news. Their daughter had been in a car accident and was rushed to the hospital. On their way to the emergency room, Heather's parents passed the scene of the crash. During a 2015 interview with WeLunk.com, her mother Jody said that this was the precise moment when she just knew that her daughter had not survived. The young woman had been a passenger in a vehicle driven by her 22-year-old friend, Justin Kearns, who walked away with minor injuries. Heather, on the other hand, died from her injuries. Her mom and dad received the news after arriving at the hospital and being put into a separate waiting room by themselves, which they took as another bad sign. The unfortunate tragedy proves that things can go terribly awry at any place and at any time, including when someone makes the seemingly safe and smart choice to stay close to home during spring break. Investigators suspected that alcohol played a role in the crash, prompting Jody to become a citizen volunteer who works at DUI checkpoints. Number 3. California crash. In 2018, 3 Las Vegas teens named A.J. Rossi, Dylan Mack, and Brooke Hawley traveled to Southern California for spring break. The 3 were driving around at 1 in the morning with another friend when their car was suddenly rear-ended on the Pacific Coast Highway. They were pushed into an intersection and their car burst into flames. The unnamed passenger managed to escape, but the other 3 were trapped in the blaze. Unfortunately, it was too late for police to save their lives, and they perished at the scene. Police arrested 27-year-old Barney Duarte, who was driving the vehicle that fatally struck the Toyota that the teens were traveling in. Huntington Beach resident Alex Martinez told the Orange County Register that he and his friends noticed Duarte driving erratically shortly before the deadly crash. They were on their way home from the gym when they saw the woman swerving and hitting curbs. The diligent civilians trailed Duarte's vehicle while they called the police. At one point, the friends caught up to the woman and asked if she was okay, pointing out that she had just hit several sidewalks. She reportedly acted confused in response, but Duarte declined their offer for a ride home and continued to drive, leading to the tragic deaths of the innocent teens she rammed her car into. Number 2. Drowning disaster. This year's spring break season has been marked by numerous tragedies. One of the first to hit headlines was the accidental drowning of a 22-year-old American woman in Cancun. Details on the incident are scarce. According to media reports, the victim was pulled from the water, where she had become caught in the tide. By the time she was rushed to the hospital, though, it was too late to save her life, and she was declared dead. The woman, whose identity was never disclosed, was reportedly with her boyfriend when she got swept out to sea. It's unknown whether there were any active red flag warnings against swimming in the area of the water that she chose to enter. A red flag would have indicated that water conditions were dangerous and represents an advisory against going swimming. When the heartbreaking story made headlines, the woman's cause of death had not yet been officially announced. The tragedy happened just weeks after a Paraguayan tourist disappeared during a red flag warning. At the time of publishing, his body had not yet been recovered, but it was widely assumed that he drowned. The Weather Channel recently published an article reminding spring breakers not to let riptides ruin their fun in the sun and advising vacationers on what to do if they find themselves stuck in one. Knowing what to do in a situation like this can absolutely save someone, as some tourists have unfortunately learned the hard way by seeing someone they care about lose their life. Number 1. Miami Mayhem. Miami is known for being a party city year-round, but things escalated to a whole new level recently when the city declared a state of emergency after 5 spring breakers were shot over the course of just 2 days. This year's spring break saw an influx of overwhelming crowds in Miami Beach. Vacationers flooded the streets and violence erupted. Police became exhausted trying to control the chaos as they scrambled to rescue one shooting victim after another. 4 officers were also injured amid the craziness. The cops were left feeling exhausted, according to a Facebook post by the Miami Beach Fraternal Order of Police, urging local officials to take action. After a weekend of mayhem, city manager Alina Hudak announced that a curfew was being imposed, starting on Thursday of that week and lasting until the following Monday. Starting just after midnight every night, people were expected to go inside, and anyone hoping for lax enforcement was in for a disappointment. Hudak made it clear that police would be patrolling South Beach to make sure that spring breakers were abiding by the rule. But the curfew was mostly ignored, and hundreds of vacationers were arrested as the revelry and crime continued. In addition to the shootings, suspects were charged with a slew of other crimes, including sexual battery, theft, fraud, and more. It soon became clear that not everyone who got in trouble was on spring break, but that the college crowds had become mixed with party-hardy adults who eagerly contributed to the problems. Thanks for watching. Would you rather spend your entire spring break inside while all your friends are out having fun, or go camping and have a ton of fun until you caught a horrible case of poison ivy? Let us know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe before you go. See you next time. Bye.